So many people ask, what's the best paper to use for markers? Hey, welcome back. This is Cetriya, C-E-T-R-I-Y-A, and today I thought I'd share a couple of my resources that I use for making marker illustrations and what kind of paper they are. I've noticed both on my videos and other people's videos, they ask, what's the best paper to use for marker? Now, in general, online, it's pretty easy to find a paper and literally type in marker paper and actually do find specialized marker papers. But those end up not being my favorite, and that does not mean that you should not try them out. However, at the end of this video, I will share what's my favorite marker and show a quick color demo. So one of the main reasons why I don't use the marker paper pads that you see online is that simply for that reason, they are online, and I've tested out those papers, and their use is mostly so that way the alcoholic marker ink does not bleed through onto the next paper. And that's great, but unless you want to spend about $10 to maybe $15 for a sheet of 20 to 40 sheets of paper, great, and also have to wait anytime you have to refill them, awesome, and have to use those kind of paper which are actually relatively thin, just a little bit thicker than regular printer paper for things like convention commissions, well, that's up to you. But today what I'd like to actually share is a couple of paper that are easy to find and what to look for when looking for a paper for markers. So right here you have my handy dandy old sketchbook that I've used in other videos, and these kind of sketchbooks you easily find in those like large discount department stores such as TJ Maxx, Micheals, Burlington, and these things are okay actually. Now these sketchbooks are pretty good and okay. The only problem is that for the most part you don't know if the paper will actually work with your markers until you test them out. Yes, they're pretty cheap, usually about $5 to $7 for anywhere from 100 or more pages. This one's 176, and it was just a little happy accident that I found this book to work very well with markers, and I can go ahead and show you some of the pages. They're relatively thin-ish but thicker than regular printer paper, and they do bleed through, and that's why a lot of times when drawing with these paper I just have like a random scrap piece of paper that I put in between to make sure that they don't overflow to the next page. And I've been fortunate, like I said, with this paper for the sketchbook. They hold the markers pretty well and they blend not too bad with them, and they spread the markers really well. Next up is the actual artist series type papers, and a lot of the times they come with different kind of sayings on the front, sometimes mixed media, sometimes drawing, sometimes sketchbook. And what I really want to just kind of give you a note for it is that even though they say sketchbook or drawing or mixed media, they do actually have a general meaning for those things, but sometimes the difference between the companies or the brands will kind of sort of just be a little bit different from each other. So right here I have the Canon mixed media. I have not tested this out with marker, so if anyone has tested out, let me know. But it does say that it takes pen and pencil and watercolor pretty well, and usually when it says that it takes acrylic and watercolor really well, it more than likely will not be good for your markers. Now you might be wondering, why is that? And that is because papers like these are meant to take in as much moisture as possible, and you might end up running your markers real dry real fast if you do so. So you want something that's just a little bit thicker than printer paper, and usually these mixed media paper are pretty thick. Like I said, anything that holds watercolor or acrylic or painting are meant to absorb as much liquid as possible, and you do not want these kind of things with your markers. It probably will hold the color pretty well, but then it'll eat up your markers pretty quickly. This book you can find online, but I think you might actually find them in places like Walmart or Target or whatnot. And this little book was about 65 pages, and they usually run anywhere from 50 to 100 pages per book, and this one cost me just under $4 for the book. And that's typically the price. They're anywhere from $3 if it's on sale to $6. And this kind of brand is very easy to find, like I said, at Micheals, Targets, Walmart and whatnot. And that's part of the reason why I really love this book. This was such an awesome find for me by accident. It holds ink well. It holds very simple watercolor pretty well. I could show you real quick some examples that if you've been following my channel for some time, you'll already seen some of these, but just to show a quick example right here, some of the marker thumbnails that I've used. I believe this is a Copic marker. These are the shuttle art markers that I practice on. And again, you can see that alcohol markers will bleed through this paper, so always use like an extra scrap of paper in between the pages. But this paper is just a little bit, maybe 2 or 3 times thicker than a regular printer paper, and it's a smooth finish. So I know for a fact that it won't eat up my markers, thank goodness. And at the same time, this has blended like the solid shaded areas pretty well, and I've been appreciating that. And fortunately, like I said, this paper have pretty much hold up to my Crayola watercolors pretty nicely. So that's the example of that guy. And another brand that's pretty popular is the Strathmore drawing paper, and I have not used Strathmore all that much. They have Strathmore Bristol, they have Strathmore illustration board. You can use the Bristol, but Bristol runs into the same problem with the mixed media in that it's a really thick paper, and it's a paper that's meant to hold more moisture than you need, and it might end up eating up your paper. And that's part of the reason why people use marker paper instead, because the marker ink sits on top of the paper. But personally, I don't like that kind of feel, because sometimes if you're not careful, you end up smudging it. But the Strathmore drawing brand or the Canson drawing brand are actually quite smooth, very. It's rare to find them in the bright white that I'd like. So in comparison to there you go. So usually they're like a softer white color instead of the bright white, and that might be, you know, a deal breaker for you. But these papers hold on to the markers pretty well, and I'll go ahead and just do a little swipe test for you guys. So this paper does take up the marker pretty well, and here's an example of what happens when you don't put a paper in between. But it's okay for what you need, especially if you want perhaps a softer illustration, a softer tone. It does hold the marker, but again, it does eat up a bit of ink. I can already tell that it's eating up the ink quite well, so that's why you might want to be careful with that and try to get something more on the sketchbook side and a thinner paper. Now, coming down to the finale, and that is cardstock. Cardstock paper is actually quite thick. They run anywhere from 65 pounds to 110 pounds. At least that's in the US. They do have cardstock internationally. And what I like about cardstock is it's considered a default printer paper, which means that it's very easy to find these papers in all stores. Pretty much you can get like a stack of 8x11s or size A4, about 250 pages to roughly $5 for 250 pages. And this is basically the best recommendation I can give, because they're easy to get, they're cheap to get, they're bright white, and I've had illustration for years, and so far they did not eat up the paper didn't turn yellow or anything like that. Again, I assume, or they assume, that since this is a printer paper, that to an extent you need to be able to hold your documents for a good long while. So I definitely recommend this paper if you're new to markers, because it's so cheap, so easy to get, you know, again, it's like $5 for 250 pages. And of course, you don't need to just use this for markers. You can use this for black and white drawings, of course, and such things like that. They don't take watercolor lightly. It doesn't really take watercolor, so I would not suggest it for that. This is very much a pen and ink and marker paper that I would use this for. Another thing that I would not recommend this for is nib pens or dip pens. If I can give a quick example, basically these kind of pens will not work on this paper because this paper will make the ink work bleed, so I would not suggest this. If you want to know more information about that, go ahead and take a look at my video. I'll link it on the video about inking tools that I use for my Inktober. And again, that's part of the reason why, if you can go ahead and find this book, I love this book because you can use nib pen inks and it won't bleed. Also, you can use a light watercolor wash and it will hold it, and it holds marker illustrations very well. So this is probably my highly recommended in general type of book, like a quick, you know, on the go mixed media book. This is my recommendation. But if you're just looking for a quick start for marker paper, just a regular smooth white brilliant cardstock is your best bet. So let me go ahead and get into doing a quick demo right here. Well, relatively quick, and that's part of the reason I'm doing this demo is I am going to be getting into Anime Boston, and I just wanted to show an example of the kind of commission work that people would be interested in. I'm working on half the size sheet of paper, but the actual commissions will be full size sheet of paper, and I'll be taking black and white illustration. This is not the black and white illustration that I'll be using because I want to show more shade. This is going to be the color illustration, and basically the prices for those commissions, in case you're at Anime Boston, will be $40 for black and white and $65 for color. And again, it'll be the full size sheet. But let's get into the coloring, shall we? This was the marker quick little sketch drawing and commission sample that I will be having for Anime Boston, used on just a regular printer cardstock smooth that you can easily find in any office supply store. This just so happened to come from Walmart. They're 250 pages for just under about $5, and this is why I highly suggest it. You can go ahead and take a quick look here about the smooth colors and stuff like that, and I just generally recommend it. And then just for a quick note, I am having my orders for my Queen sketchbook that I did based on the Inktober illustration. I am definitely proud about this book, so if you're interested in owning maybe a little collection of my works, go ahead and check out the link below to the website and the shop link. Otherwise, if you found this video helpful or interesting, please leave a comment below, and by all means share to any other person or forums or blogs or whatnot that people would find of interest. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.